Right. Hi, everybody. Welcome. We're glad to have you here with us today. This is the first part of a two-part webinar series that we're putting on at the Pedestrian Bicycle Information Center about quick build networks. We're going to really dive into this trend we're seeing in cities and in states of delivering these low-stress networks for bicycling, for walking, for e-scooter usage, for other variety of modes. Quickly with lower cost treatments so that we can get these networks out to the people who need them. So we're going to spend some time over the next 2 days really diving into not only what are the trends that we're seeing in quick build, what does this terminology mean, and how are we differentiating this from how we've traditionally done business, focusing some attention on that, and then really profiling efforts in 3 different cities, Houston, Minneapolis, and San Jose, and how they're deploying these networks, what they're learning, and the lessons that they have to share with you all. So I'm glad you're with us today. My name's Dan Jeline. I'm with the Pedestrian and Bicycle Information Center. And what I'd like to do first is really take an opportunity to share some information with you about the panelists that we have coming up today. So we've got, just so you know, some of the panelists will be presenting today, and then others will be presenting tomorrow. So I'd like to spend some time and introduce you first to Aaliyah Anderson, who's the North American Director of Planning for Tool Design Group, a consulting firm that specializes in active transportation and complete streets. Aaliyah's experience includes working with local governments, developers, metropolitan planning organizations, and other partners to develop bicycle plans, complete streets policies, design guides, Vision Zero action plans, and other similar resources. She has also served as the co-author of numerous reports on transit-oriented development and complete streets for the Federal Transit Administration, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and FHWA. We're really pleased to have Aaliyah here with us today. We've also got Amar Mohite as joining us. He is the Director of Planning and Infrastructure for Harris County Precinct 1, and he leads the development and coordination of multimodal transportation and infrastructure projects. Recent projects include development of 17 miles of high comfort bikeway network within the city of Houston and 21 miles of trails and bikeways in Precinct 1 Park. Mr. Mohite previously led the Transportation Planning Division at the City of Houston's Planning Department. He's managed and coordinated a range of planning and transportation projects, studies, and development of ordinances inclusive of the Transit Corridor Ordinance, Complete Streets Policy, and the Houston Bike Plan. And just so you all know, we'll be focusing our time today with Aaliyah and Amar. Tomorrow, we'll be joined by Matthew Deardahl, who's Bicycle and Pedestrian Coordinator for the City of Minneapolis, Peter Bennett, who's a transportation specialist for the City of San Jose, and John Brazil, who helps manage a team of 6 in the City of San Jose's Walk, Bike, Scoot program. So we'll hear from all of these cities. We've actually got our 3 panelists from tomorrow on with us today. So they're going to be able to jump into the discussion if issues arise. We'll be sort of having that seamless transition then between today's presentation and tomorrow. So again, we're glad you're here to join us to hear about this topic. I have a few housekeeping items to go through with you right now. We want to encourage you to submit your questions at any time. We're going to hold about half an hour at the end of the presentations today to get into the Q&A and really respond to a lot of your questions. So please keep those coming in the questions pod. Please also send any technical issues you're having, any questions about just logistics. I'll monitor that area and try to respond as I'm able. The webinar archive page will be set up at www.pedbikeinfo.org/webinars. If you go to that page, you can find the webinar from today and drill down. At that page right now, what we have is posted a PDF copy of our presentations. I've also made that available. If you look into the GoToWebinar control panel, there's a section called handouts. You can download that PDF copy there. I'll shoot the link out to you in just a moment in the chat pod, just so you've got that right in front of you, in case you want to look back and refer back to any of the material that we're sharing today. There's a follow-up email that'll be coming to you later today that'll have a link to the archive page. It'll have a video recording of the webinar today, and it'll have a certificate that you can generate showing completed 1.5 hours of instruction. So if that'll help you report your continuing education requirements, please keep an eye out for that email with that link. We've also submitted and had the webinar approved by the American Institute of Certified Planners for 1.5 CM credits. So I'm hopeful that you all will be able to claim those credits if you need them and use this toward your continuing education requirements. We are holding part 2 tomorrow, so it'll be the same time. You have to do a separate registration for that. So be sure to register for that session if you aren't already. I'll send a link out to that in a moment. And just one reminder, an announcement from the Federal Highway Administration, they did recently update the bicycle facility design training from NHI and FHWA. That is available online now for you to access. And it's going to really dovetail, I think, quite nicely with some of the material that we are sharing today. A lot of the bike facility questions you may have, a lot of that background training, technical training is really good to kind of help brush up on some of those facility types. We do have some upcoming sessions that I wanted to share with you, just announce these. One next Wednesday and the other the following Thursday, both from the Safe Transportation for Every Pedestrian program. STEP was an FHWA initiative. So the first is going to talk through a new campaign on helping to promote the use of safety countermeasures at pedestrian crossings. That's May 27th. And then the next one will be really all about developing and delivering pedestrian safety projects and really looking at the cooperation and collaboration between state and local agencies in a case study example. So if you're interested in these, visit that website, pedbikeinfo.org/webinars, and you can register there. I am going to, without any further delay, hand it over to our first presentation today from Aaliyah Anderson to really help set the stage for this webinar series. So Aaliyah, take a look at your screen and I'll let you know when you're up and running. Okay. Great, you're all set, Aaliyah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Dan, and welcome everyone. It's a real pleasure to be with you today. I appreciate everyone taking the time to join this webinar, and I'm personally pretty thrilled to get to talk about something that's very near and dear to my heart, quick build transportation projects. So the presentation that I'm going to share is drawn from my company, Tool Design Group's work helping to plan, design, and help implement these quick build projects in cities throughout North America, as well as some research from around the world. So let's jump in. My goal really is to set the stage for the case studies that you're going to hear today from Houston or Harris County, Texas, and tomorrow from San Jose and Minneapolis. I'm going to go over some definitions and examples, so we're all talking about the same thing. There's a lot of terms that get thrown around, and I want to make sure we're all having the same conversation. And then I'm going to share some cross-cutting themes that we've gathered from really dozens of examples about why this is so popular and so many cities are doing this, key considerations and takeaways for your success. So first of all, quick build is an approach that focuses resources, whether that's funding, staff, consultant time, engagement, advocates, all of it, focused resources to deliver transportation projects that can be constructed very quickly. Quick build projects use semi-permanent materials that the whole point is that they allow adjustments to be made once the project is up and running. They can be pilots where the city council votes later whether to keep, remove, or upgrade or change them, or they can just be part of the phased implementation of networks. Why is this something that we've been seeing so much more of lately? Well, part of this is there have been a few really bold and visionary leaders in a couple of cities around the world who piloted quick build designs and gotten a lot of attention for it. And we're going to talk about those. Many of those are showcased in the case studies that we're presenting today and tomorrow. But bigger picture, there are a number of national and international trends that are pushing jurisdictions towards quick build solutions. The first is certainly the rapid expansion and adoption of Vision Zero around the US, with many dozens of cities making highly public commitments to eliminating traffic deaths and serious injuries. I wonder how many participants on the webinar today are from Vision Zero cities yourself, where you've been tasked with helping to implement a Vision Zero plan, and you're looking at that mandate and comparing it with the typical capital budget and timeline for project implementation. It's just obvious in so many places that there isn't time to stick to conventional methods to implement life-saving infrastructure solutions and achieve Vision Zero goals. Second, there's been a lot of research to document the rising demand in cities for active and sustainable transportation, things related to the convergence of efforts around reducing GHG, greenhouse gas emissions, an increased focus and just more activity around biking, walking, more people living healthier lifestyles and wanting to run and scoot and bike around their cities. And even the emergence of micromobility, things like scooters in cities that have put new demands, more demands than ever, on our sidewalks and our bike lanes. The pressure really has never been higher for wider, protected, safer places to walk and bike. And I think that's a big motivator behind these quick build. And the last one is that, of course, municipal budgets generally are not growing or keeping pace with the rising cost of infrastructure. So when a city's bike plan or its ADA transition plan or sidewalk master plan says that it'll take until 2040 or 2050 to implement a basic network of accessible sidewalks or low-stress bikeways, really no one comes out of that satisfied with the progress that they're making. So that's why this is so popular. So let's take a moment to talk about terminology. There's a lot of terms that are used in this space, and none of them are wrong, but we're using the term quick build today, so let's talk about what we mean by that. Quick build is also sometimes referred to as rapid implementation. We use those two terms interchangeably, and you may hear us slip back and forth between them today. Basically, what we mean by that is something that's different from a pop-up or a demonstration or a pilot. Those things are originally designed to be installed for maybe a day, a month, or up to a year. Quick build is about using semi-permanent materials to implement a project for usually a 1 to 5 year timeline, with the purpose of getting it installed quickly and then collecting data about safety and use, and then ideally installing a permanent design that responds to what you learned from that quick build timeline. Now, excuse me, there are lots of resources out there for installing pop-up or demonstration projects, things like better block projects or open streets for a day, that type of thing. That's not really our focus for today. You're not going to see a lot of straw bales and flower planter pots as separators in the pictures that we show today. When we say quick build, we're talking about infrastructure that is a little more permanent and more robust, meaning that it's meant to be in place for years, not days. It's also worth noting that these projects are certainly applicable to the current pandemic. The increased demand for biking and walking facilities is really high right now, as everybody's experiencing and reading. But these projects were being installed, these quick build projects were being installed long before our current situation. So this webinar is certainly relevant to that, but it's not directly tied to the pandemic and COVID response. Again, there are lots of resources out there specific to that. I put a link here on the screen for one session that we held. If you Google tool design, rebalancing streets for people, you can dive in more deeply to that subject. But again, that's not entirely the focus today. All right, let's rewind to where a lot of the momentum around quick build implementation started. One of the stories that's really helped quick build gain so much momentum comes from Seville, Spain. So in 2006, Seville had a 7-mile disconnected network of bikeways. A new political administration helped bring about a master plan for a citywide bike network that was primarily separated bike lanes, recognizing that increased comfort could really make a big difference in people's biking habits. And Seville added 40 miles of separated bike lane in a single year. Now, for anybody who works for a city or county, you know how incredibly mind-blowing that is that they were able to accomplish that volume of implementation. And the investment very intentionally created a connected network that reached most of the neighborhoods in the city and connected them to the city center. The other thing that's amazing is that they did a lot of research about the effects of this implementation on ridership and safety before and after implementation. And that's why, because they have that data, we're able to actually track and understand what the impact was. So let's check it out. So this chart shows mileage of the cycle track network. That's the green line, how many miles of cycle tracks they had. The blue line shows bicycle ridership, and the red line shows crash risk. So the data that they collected shows us that starting in 2006, Seville had an increased bicycling use by over 400%. And at the same time, they decreased the crash risk for bicyclists by over 60%. Now, they went on to expand their bike network in subsequent years after 2007. You can see that here. But the biggest drop in crashes and increase in ridership happened right around what's now called the big jump from 2006 to 2007. And, you know, city officials there said that if they had tried to build that same system 1 mile at a time, they never would have been able to get past the first 10 miles. The project faced enormous opposition from all sides. Again, something that I'm guessing many of you have experienced. People upset about parking removal and travel lanes being converted to bike lanes, business owners upset about construction, all the same concerns that we all face in our cities. But that quick build method allowed them to move forward and get the community to experience the system rather than just talking and arguing about it. So what did the facilities look like? These are the bikeways from Seville. Many of them were built via repurposing transportation travel lanes or sidewalk space. Many of them were installed using paint and bollards and other low cost tools. That's a really a key aspect here that you're going to hear about a lot, is providing high comfort facilities that focus on safety and are accessible to the broadest audience possible. These projects are, of course, transportation infrastructure projects, usually motivated by safety, but they have a component of public relations to them, where you are using these infrastructure projects to demonstrate to people the power that infrastructure has to improve safety and convenience and access for them in their lives. Give people something to experience rather than just, you know, being concerned about change. It's really important too that the visual appearance of the design is easy to understand and follow. People don't want a bunch of signs teaching them how to use a facility. The design itself should be intuitive and easy to follow, and that was a real key to success in Seville. So quick build, they come in every form. It's not just about bikeways. Here are examples of temporary sidewalks, sometimes called pedestrian lanes or shared use paths. One from Minneapolis, you're going to hear more about that, about these types of projects tomorrow. And another project by the city of Baltimore in cooperation with People for Bikes in the Big Jump effort. Notice that in both examples, we're using semi-permanent materials that separate bicycles and pedestrians from traffic. They're really quick to install and, importantly, fairly easy to change if needed. Now, especially in Vision Zero cities, quick build designs are being used to create slower vehicle turning speeds and safer crossings for pedestrians at intersections. So there's lots of forms and modifications that these projects can come in, and sometimes even including art for more visual appeal and community engagement. In Calgary, that's what's shown here, and also in Edmonton, much of the bicycle network was built using curb stops pinned to the asphalt, flex posts mounted to the curb stop. So really quick to install, cheap materials, conflict markings, and bicycle signals at intersections. And then these last examples I wanted to share, quick build installations, of course, can be used to improve school access. Maybe this is the approach you've been looking for implementing your Safe Routes to School action plan, as you can see in Calgary on the left, or to improve transit access. For example, with this snap together floating bus island in Oakland, California. So now that we have a sort of common definition and vision in our mind for what we're talking about here, let's dive a little bit deeper into why so many jurisdictions are taking this approach. The first reason, of course, is that results from transportation projects often take way too long to implement. I think in my experience, you know, it's pretty typical for a standard bicycle and pedestrian project to have maybe a 2 to 3 year timeline. It's very common. Now, during this time, staff can change, budget expectations can evolve, the public can get frustrated, especially when the project is responding to a known safety issue. You know, people are still out there walking and biking every day during that 2 to 3 year timeline under unsafe conditions. And that 2 to 3 year timeline might be for one intersection improvement or 1 mile or even a half mile or quarter mile of new bikeway. And so when the public step back after that 2 to 3 year timeline and compare that pace of progress to the pedestrian or bicycle master plan, it's no wonder that in many places they develop a sense of skepticism or frustration. The timeline shown on the slide here is from a, sorry about that, everyone, is from a transportation project that we've been involved in. This is unusual, but not unheard of. And again, I'm guessing there are many people on this call who have at least one project in their professional experience that turned into a 10 or 15, or in this case, even 20-year project. This one faced really complex environmental, regulatory, and funding hurdles, but still, this happens. And of course, that means that people get frustrated in the interim and the safety condition persists or even worsens over this timeline. Whereas with quick build, it can move really fast and people get to see examples really quickly. So these articles from Edmonton, when they implemented their quick build bikeway network, demonstrating that people were positive about the implementation of the bike network after they got to see it and experience it. And they saw a doubling in bicycle trips in the first month their network was operated. Research from the University of Alberta showed that the downtown bike grid reduced traffic stress and travel time for bicyclists. So they were able to document the improvements that the connected network had over a really short period of time. You know, another big reason that people are doing this is, of course, fear of change. This graph is really interesting. The city of Calgary tracked calls to their 311 system about the city center cycle track network pilot, and they categorized the sentiment of the calls as either negative, positive, or neutral. And you can see negative being the red comments that close to after construction time, the majority, they were getting a lot of negative, and certainly right before, during construction, getting a lot of negative comments. But as soon as the cycle tracks were open, the positive comments started to balance out the negative ones. And over a fairly short timeline, you can see down here, this is just a month or so, the calls really dropped down to a more kind of typical volume, and we're fairly balanced between positive, neutral, and negative. So instead of dragging that negative feedback out over years and years and years with very slow implementation, you can handle it and respond to that critique and comment, and frankly change the projects in response to people's concerns because you've used quick build infrastructure. Another reason that quick build is very positive, or excuse me, very popular as a strategy is that with traditional design, we find that perfect can often be the enemy of good. We never want these projects to be rushed through and result in compromises to the safety of their design. So don't misunderstand that it's not about lessening your quality control process or fast forwarding through typical review processes, but oftentimes project delivery can get bogged down moving designs from 90% to 100% because what's being built is permanent and it's very expensive. It feels like it has to be perfect. With quick build projects, we often avoid this. We focus on 90% design because the infrastructure we're using allows for adjustment in the field once the network is operating or the facility is in place. We can get it in place quicker. In Calgary, they made over 100 adjustments during the pilot period based on public and business feedback and input from the City of Calgary operations staff and contractors. Another reason that this is a really fantastic approach is that communities are tying their quick build projects to broader goals related to community development, health, and sustainability. With 1 mile or a half mile of bike lanes or one intersection improvements, it's really a bicycle and pedestrian project. Whereas with a citywide network of Vision Zero infrastructure investments or transit access improvements implemented over a short timeline, you really are able to tell an authentic story about greenhouse gas emissions, economic development, physical activity, social cohesion, etc. So it's much easier to tie these projects to your broader goals. In San Jose, you're going to hear more about this tomorrow. The emphasis really has been about pedestrian and bicycle safety. In Edmonton, these were about economic development and about attracting and retaining talent in their downtown. In New Orleans, these types of projects have been paired with the Moving New Orleans Multimodal Transportation Equity Plan, with a very strong focus on providing equitable transportation opportunities for communities that need greater access to services. And the last reason we've talked about already is that everybody's facing the same thing that I imagine many of you are, challenges with limited funding. These quick build projects allow us to stretch our transportation dollars. They are oftentimes using lower cost materials, which means that you can implement more for your dollar. Now, the cost has varied greatly across the different systems that we've looked at. We've got numbers from Calgary. They invested about $4 million in a 4-mile network. Edmonton invested $5 million in a 5-mile network. Seville's cost was about $20 million in their initial 40-mile network. And you'll hear more from Houston and Minneapolis and San Jose today and tomorrow about their costs. But typically, these projects are coming in at a lower cost per mile than conventional implementation strategies. So again, strengths of quick build: don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. It will help you manage that fear of change, and you can address the challenges of limited funding and slow results. I wanted to touch briefly on what's so quick about quick build. What is it that's going faster that allows you to get these projects done? I've already talked about this. Of course, cheap materials lead to mean quick installation. The other thing is these are typically advanced through a consolidated planning and design process instead of a linear and protracted concept planning, concept design, 60% design, 90%, 100% design process. This is usually much more iterative, where you're doing public engagement while you're developing the concept plan. You've got folks from your operations team and your implementation team involved from the outset, so that there's shorter feedback loops throughout the entire design process. There's also typically a lot of field engineering, so you might get to a 75% or a 90% design plan, and then take it to the field and start to install it and figure some of the final details out in the field as you implement. Usually these projects require dedicated staff and consulting support. So in most examples that we've either been part of or researched, there is a dedicated team who focus most of their time on getting these projects implemented. And that is pretty critical because it's going to take more time to do this over a short period, of course. They need to be prioritized in terms of review phases. I know your agency has a lot of priorities at any given time, but these projects, to meet the timeline, they're going to need to receive some expedition in terms of their review cycles and permitting, things like that. And so most jurisdictions end up having, you know, weekly or bi-weekly cross-agency team meetings where everybody's coordinating so that there's not a lot of lag time in the review and design process. You're going to hear about this a lot from our case studies, but somebody with some clout needs to make these projects a political priority. That is pretty consistent across all of the examples that we've studied, that there is a champion who maintains consistent support in terms of staff time and funding for these projects. And it is really important to emphasize that quick build is not an opportunity to skimp on public engagement, on your permitting or review process, your approvals, or your engineering evaluation and quality control. You're doing these things quickly and with short feedback loops, but you're not skipping them and you're not jamming projects through these systems to reduce the quality of the results. That would be a setup for failure. I'm going to walk quickly through a couple of key considerations, some recommendations that we've extracted from the various quick build projects that we've studied from around the world. I'm going to go fairly quickly through these. So the first one is it's really important to be clear about who makes decisions. So anytime you're designing and implementing a transportation project, there are going to be differences of opinion, and they could lead to a stalemate within an agency. People from operations or public works who disagree with a certain design choice, or your engineering staff disagreeing with your planning staff, and things like that. This is pretty typical, as all of you have experienced in project implementation. It's pretty critical that you have a clear chain of command for making decisions. A project manager, somebody from senior leadership who's going to adjudicate basically in times of differences of opinions, and everybody needs to be clear about that chain of command. This can obviously be done in an open format with clear communication to create a trusting and collaborative environment that reduces the amount of friction, but it is really important that you have a plan in place for when a decision just simply needs to be made. The next key consideration is do not compromise on the design for safety, accessibility, and equity. I've talked about this a bit already, but it is really critical that in moving this project forward quickly, you make sure that somebody on your design staff has a nuanced understanding of the safety implications of, especially if you're implementing an innovative bikeway or pedestrian treatment that hasn't been used before. You need experts on safety and accessibility at the table for every single step along the way. And so be sure that you keep that part of your staffing plan from the get-go. Similarly, we would recommend that equity is a central consideration in these projects. If you are considering implementing quick build projects, for example, let's imagine in a quick build bike lane in a neighborhood that views bike lanes as a symbol of gentrification, that is a recipe for failure. So putting equity at the front of these conversations from the beginning is absolutely essential to your success. And that really leads to a conversation about community engagement. We're going to talk more over the next, during the next case study and tomorrow about the importance of community engagement and collaboration with the community on these projects. But it is absolutely essential. Something that we've learned from these projects around the country is that the idea cannot feel like it's being forced on the community. There's a way to do this where the public will be thrilled to see how quickly progress is being made. This is sort of what they've always been asking for from your agency, you know, something that is turned around really quickly. But if it starts to feel like it's being forced on them, then it will fail. And so striking that balance and doing a robust engagement process as part of this effort is going to be critical. You're going to hear about that some today from Harris County and Houston, Texas, and more from San Jose and Minneapolis tomorrow. It's really important to remember that your public engagement doesn't stop on opening day. So these are some photos from Edmonton. Once the bike network was up, they had pop-up meetings, they had intercept surveys going on, and they were collecting feedback from people, both helping people understand the new network, but also gathering their feedback to understand what was working and what wasn't. Again, all being fed into that process of making tweaks to the network and the design to make sure that it really was working well for folks. Now, these projects are typically mostly about safety, but as I mentioned before, there is certainly a public relations component to them. And if they are poorly maintained, people won't appreciate them, they won't like them, they will feel frustrated by them. And so it is critical that you design them with maintenance in mind in terms of the ongoing budget and also the equipment that you have. I know many cities, when it comes to separated bike lanes in particular, don't have the processes in place right now, or potentially the equipment for snow clearance and sweeping and maintenance of separated bike lanes. And most cities, as they build out their separated bike lane networks, have ended up having to either invest in that equipment or have made minor design tweaks to their separated bike lanes with their existing equipment in mind to make sure that it will work. So please make sure that you're considering maintenance from the outset. And the last tip for success is about including design and operations together from the outset. And I've touched on this a bit, so I'll probably just leave it at that, but bring your operations team into the design process early on. So I wish that there was a playbook, a recipe book that we could just say, this is how you do this. But the truth is, in every city and county that we've looked at, the model for resourcing, staffing, and managing this has been very different. And so you're going to learn more about that through the case studies that we've talked about today. But I just want to emphasize to you that you are going to need to come up with a model for staffing and managing this that works for your city. So a couple of examples of that: in Austin, Texas, the city has bond funding for capital projects. They've hired a consultant team through a staff augmentation contract for an ongoing period, and that team is focused on implementing quick build and permanent transportation investments that are similar to the ones we're talking about today. The Houston model is different. You're going to hear about how the city transferred ownership of their roads to the county for the design and construction phase, and Harris County hired the consultant. So this was a really collaborative process that Amar is going to talk about more in just a few minutes. In New Orleans and in Baltimore and in many other places, People for Bikes has been a key partner, investing in resources and staff and support for some of these implementations efforts. And so there's lots and lots of different methods. And there are many examples, like in Edmonton, where the city's operations department installed all the facilities themselves and did a lot of the design work in-house. So there's many, many models for this, and I'm sure there's one that will fit your community. So quick recap of the ingredients for success. You've got to maintain champions throughout the entire project. Something that is really critical that I haven't actually talked about too much yet is emphasizing the network in public engagement. I mentioned this earlier, that quarter mile, half mile bike lane, or one intersection improvement will not compel the public as much as a network. So bundling these projects and messaging them as a system has been key to success in most of the jurisdictions that we've researched. Of course, the design needs to prioritize safety, look to show results really quickly so that the public can experience them, build a collaborative team of designers and operators, and remember that your initial projects are just the beginning. You need to keep evaluating those projects, and you need to keep checking back with the public. Create a system up front to measure your performance and share those stories back. So this is an infographic from the city of Calgary about the cycle track pilot, just showing all of the messaging that they were doing about the pilot as it was being rolled out. And this is some social media that was going on at the same time. That's part of the storytelling. This is really important to help. It can actually be even more impactful than just research and numbers, where you have people telling their own stories about riding on these facilities or walking on these facilities. So I'm excited to hand it over to Amar for the first case study, and just want to emphasize that you're going to be talking to some of the experts in the country and even the world on these topics over today and tomorrow, and encourage you to ask a lot of questions because we'd love to get way into the weeds. So with that, I really want to thank you and hand it back over to Dan.
Okay, thank you so much, Aaliyah. What a great way to kind of set the stage and really hit a lot of points that I know our case study panelists are really going to revisit and reinforce from their experience. So I'm going to hand the screen now over to Amar. Amar, I'll let you know when I see your screen if you want to go ahead and, yep, all right. Great, well, it looks good. You're all set. I just want to remind the crowd, everyone, please keep those questions coming in. We've got a lot of good topics for the discussion so far, but please keep them coming, and we'll get to those in our final half hour. So Amar, go right ahead.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Aaliyah, for setting it up in such a comprehensive way. I think so. Our goal is to really now tell our stories, and so this is more of a story that I'm going to tell you as to what we did in Houston, or what happened in Houston, Harris County, and I think so. As we hear more stories tomorrow, it'll be a really interesting. You will find out that there is no one way to do it right. what is right for your community, you have to decide as you move forward through the process. That is just something for you all to consider. The Houston story is Commissioner Ellis has been an advocate and big proponent for bicycling for a number of decades now. When he was a senator in the state legislature, he moved forward a number of bike-friendly bills, including the Texas bicycle tourism legislation, which is now looking at potentially adding 8,000 miles of trail network in Texas that is being studied by the Texas Department of Transportation. The Safe Routes to School bill, which provides dedicated funding for nonprofit bicycle safety education. He was able to pass through the House and Senate the Safe Passing bill. However, it was vetoed by the then governor. But what happened was 27 cities have now adopted ordinances, so it's still moving forward. He also hosted, so it's not just passing bills, but also he hosted the first NAACP Bike Texas annual bike ride in Texas, and this is now going on for 11 consecutive years. He also hosted 13 annual bike rides at annual conventions at the National Conference of State Legislature. Hundreds of state senators and state reps from all over the US, Canada, and other countries participated in the bipartisan bike ride. So he is one of the true champions that you see in your communities of bicycling, and he preaches it every day, every moment. I just got a missed call from him a few seconds ago, so so in 2017, when he came to when he was elected to be the Harris County Commissioner in 2017, he had the ability to influence infrastructure rather than just policy. In mid 2017, I joined his team along with some of my colleagues to lead the capital infrastructure for Harris County Precinct 1. And once on board, I think so that year we got hit by Hurricane Harvey, so it was just catching up on hurricane recovery and other things. But in early 2018, I still remember freshly getting a call from the commissioner, and I just got up and was walking around my office, and he said, I want to talk to the mayor, and this is what we are going to do. We are going to invest into city's bicycle infrastructure, and we are going to do it as a challenge. The city has 1 year to spend this money. What is the right amount? Should I do 10 million, 20 million? What is the right amount? And I was like, I was taking a deep breath, and we finally agreed to it. He finally reached a commitment with the city, a partnership with the city of Houston for 10 million to be spent in a 1 year deadline, which we met. And during the same time, we worked closely with a nonprofit bike organization, which is Bike Houston, and Bike Houston ended up challenging the Mayor Toner to build 50 miles of bikeway in Houston in 1 year. And so the city accepted the challenge, and the city did build over 43 miles of bikeway, not just as a part of our project, but other ongoing projects at the city. So it was a very 2018, 2019 was a very good year for Houston, and 2020 is as more projects are opening up, it's becoming it's a great time to be in Houston, Texas. So I should have missed these slides, and so it's basically he's a great champion, and the challenge was for the city of Houston. And last year we opened the first leg of the separated bike lane in one of our north side communities. That's the third picture. A little bit about Harris County Precinct 1. You can see the dark boundaries. Harris County is home to 1.1 million residents. It is a diverse urban precinct that covers 363 square miles. Precinct 1 is multiracial with population of roughly 39% African Americans, 37% Latino, 18% Anglo, and 5% Asian, and 1% others. So as you can see, it's a very diverse. It's also an interesting. It means I think so. 75% of the people in Harris County Precinct 1 live in another city, a municipal jurisdiction. 70% being in City of Houston. So in order to serve our residents in Precinct 1, we have to work very closely with the City of Houston and for better outcomes for our community. Roughly, if several neighborhoods, more than 30% of our households. I'm going to skip to the next slide, which will give you a little bit sense of our median household income in Harris County Precinct 1. 30% of the households have no vehicle or fewer vehicles than workers. And so in Precinct 1, every day we look at projects with very much of an equity lens. Really the goal is to, if in one sentence I had to define what my goal is, what my assignments is to improve equitable access to healthy transportation choices, connecting neighborhoods and destinations to destinations and opportunities, and improving safety as we prioritize projects in Precinct 1. So that's really what I am assigned to do. Here's another picture, is another image of showing areas in Precinct 1 that are below poverty line. So I think so equity is a very integral part of anything and everything that we do in Precinct 1. And I just want to highlight the importance of that. So just to tell the story, I have to give a shout out to our partners at City of Houston and the Houston Parks Board. In 2012, there was a bond referendum, and the city, with an overwhelming majority, approved $100 million funding towards new trails and towards parks and trails. That's the best way to describe these bayous. So Houston has Harris County, I would say, has around 10 bayous. You don't see them 2 on the north, but you see 8 in the picture here. And so this Bayou Greenway was, how do you convert these bayous that traverse east-west into park space and giving access to the communities, to the natural, to nature, and rather than just treating these bayous as drainage channels. And so with that bond referendum, the goal was by 2020 to achieve 150 miles of trails, 3,000 acres of green space, and it was a great public-private partnership. 100 million was raised through the bond referendum, with another 120 million from the private sector. Commissioner Ellis, as always, came in at the end and closed the deal with the amount of funding that was left to complete the Bayou Greenway 2020 initiative this year. So just to give you in summary what was achieved is this is just for giving you a sense of scale of so in the pinkish orangish color you see the Precinct 1, and the background you also see the freeway loops in Houston. And then the purple boundaries are what the mayor's key initiative at that point was, complete communities, in trying to do wraparound, look at wraparound needs within communities, underserved communities, and improving so that they can be studied, and we could create better outcomes for those neighborhoods in a more comprehensive manner. And so we partnered with the city, and when we started the planning phase, we started at 33 miles and the planning phase. By the time we went to, we did the community engagement, and we ended up getting into study phase. We dropped down to 23 miles, and what is under construction right now and has been built is 18 miles of high comfort bikeways. So Houston, as the example with Civil was, had 8 miles of, I would not call everything high comfort. Some of those were high comfort, but standard bikeways. And today we are over 26 miles with the 18 miles under construction, and a number of other partners like our transit agency, Metro, and the city is also implementing other high comfort bikeways now in the city of Houston. So that number is going to keep on increasing over the 26 miles. So in 2 years, we did let the project, as the commissioner wanted us to let the project within a year's deadline, while learning how to do quick builds. We are over $12 million by now. But I think so this project, what that you see in the dark blue color, is really going to achieve connections to 3 bayous, 10 parks, 11 schools, 4 university campuses, 37,000 people within quarter mile, and 92,000 jobs within quarter mile. We are going to have, we would have built 13.7 miles of protected bike lanes, 1.5 miles of striped bike lanes, still high comfort, 2.5 miles of neighborhood bikeways, and 0.3 miles of off-road segments, just to give a summary of what would have been achieved with this quick build project. Now, to tell our story of quick builds, so here was the structure. So we were able to achieve this quick build under an agreement framework. Harris County is pretty nimble in terms of designing and implementing infrastructure. So we had that really supporting us. And then a few months before that, the city and county had come up with a master interlocal agreement that did not require us to go to city council every time there was a partnership project. And so that allowed us to leverage that structure to be able to do, because Harris County cannot spend money on infrastructure that belongs to another municipality. We had to have a way of taking over the city streets for all on paper. And so as we took over the city street, we owned the street, and we could implement and we could invest in that infrastructure. So that was the mechanism that was the most effective mechanism to meet the commissioner's 1-year deadline. And so the way we had done the division of labor between the city and county, you can see on that spreadsheet there. Harris County would be funding the infrastructure. We would be planning the network. So we got our planning and design team. We would be designing the network. We would be constructing the network. And as a part of the construction, you have a 1-year maintenance period. So we would be maintaining the network for 1 year and then handing that back to the city. A lot of it was done through our Harris County Engineering Department, and I would give a big shout out to them because I really appreciated when we threw this challenge at them saying, yes, we will figure out and we will get it done within the year as the commissioner wanted it done. And on the city, we partnered with the city, and the city really led the community engagement, the stakeholder engagement, all the people coming to city council who did not like what was happening and complaining about it. So we really appreciate the city, both the planning and public works department taking and the city council taking a number of comments when someone did not like losing parking or having to park across the street. And then when you come to, in Texas, your parking spot is very important to residents. So when you have to park instead of front of your house across the street, it's a challenge for some people. The city also did the design review and approval process. They were very flexible in terms of we had set the standard 30, 60, 90, and then 100% submittals. But we were allowed for certain projects to go from directly to 60 or directly to 90%, depending on the complexity of the project. Long-term maintenance is also the responsibility of the city, and there were a number of departments involved. The planning department and the public works and engineering department were the primary departments, and we worked very closely with the parks departments, solid waste, because after doing the design on the first one, we realized we need to talk to solid waste to figure out how the trash pickup would happen. And so that was a learning curve. And then we had to work with parking management for moving existing metered parking spaces, as you'll see in some of the images. On the design, so the other critical thing for making this happen was, as I would say, is our design team and other partners. We were lucky. So since I had worked on the bike plan when I was working with the city of Houston, we had a very good planning team, local planning team, and we had reached out to them for the planning and design and to build their capacity, because it was all to be done in 1 year, and we wanted to do it in a project that would be that would get some national recognition. And so we wanted to make sure that we brought in national best practices. So we reached out to Tool, and we were really excited to have the Tool team partner with our Traffic Engineers Inc. firm to lead the design, to lead the planning and design for all our network. On the project management side, we knew this is something we had not done. We would need a dedicated project manager. We had a local project management team, Jones and Carter, lead the project management, and we had an awesome project manager from that team. We liked the project manager so much that we ended up hiring the project manager to work for Harris County. And then on the agency side, we worked very closely with our transit agency, because a number of the bikeways overlap with our transit routes. So we looked at opportunities for improving access to transit, and worked with our transit agencies for relocating bus stops or making bus operations better. And you'll see some of the pictures. We also, you cannot do any project in Houston that does not go across a freeway. And so we had to work very closely with the Texas Department of Transportation to make sure that all of these projects, as they went across TxDOT facility, met TxDOT design guidelines and approval processes. And they worked with us pretty closely in getting. We would not have achieved this in such a short time frame if we had not had their commitment to work with us. And we also partnered with management districts and TERSs. In some jurisdictions, you may be calling them TIFs. The big thing for the commissioner has always been that this needs to be a partnership. And so whenever we did a project in the management district or TERSs, we always looked at partnership opportunities as to, as we did this infrastructure, was there anything else they would want to fund, so that at the end of the day, the community got a better project. We also partnered with local nonprofit organizations like Bike Houston, Houston Bike Share, and a number of civic clubs in super neighborhoods. I'm going to go through these, and then I can answer quickly, and I can answer questions. And it's really critical for me to say that leadership matters. It's amazing to have a boss who will demand, who will challenge you, who will encourage you, and who will support you. I could not have asked for better supervisor and boss. I will get calls, text messages in the middle of the night saying, I can't sleep. What is the next best thing we are doing? What is the next network we are planning in this planning in Precinct 1? Roles and responsibilities, as another, it's when you start a quick build projects, it's really important to have a clear understanding what are the roles and responsibility of each agency who is going to be who's going to be involved in this project, who's going to review, what is the review process, what is the committed timeline for being able to implement these projects in a timely fashion, clearly defining what are the goals. For us, the goal was we would do a project if it meets all ages and abilities. So there were a number of projects that we said we cannot do the project if we cannot achieve all ages and abilities. And so it's very it's important to have clear understandings of clear understanding of roles and responsibilities, and commitment from agencies and partners to ensure that there's a point of contact who is responsible for getting the project responses done in a timely fashion. I call this rules of engagement. Is you want to make sure that you have a clear understanding of not just the review process, but also what are the design toolkits. Means since this was our first project, we stumbled through it, but having a clear toolkit, having clear guidelines on what works, what doesn't work, what are options, what is option A, what is option B, is critical, because if one option does not work, you need to have other options to achieve that same goal. And then how would and even for stakeholder and community engagement, you need to have a clear set of, because when you are doing it in partnership with other agencies, you need to have a lockstep process where you do not delay the process because you have not thought through the issues and challenges and how you're going to communicate with the community and others. That gets us into community engagement. Community engagement is critical, as Alia said. And what we learned was it's not just community engagement. There are different stages of community engagement. Yeah, there's community engagement during the planning stage. There's community engagement during the design stage. There is community engagement during the construction phase. And each phase is community engagement is important. You have to work with local stakeholders because they are not used to seeing these projects, and you want their acceptance and their support in creating a better outcome for those communities. And as I mentioned, it means your teams and partners are critical, because if you think that projects are going to go straight forward, it never happens. You'll always have new challenges. So having a team that understands what needs to be delivered and how it needs to be delivered in a timely fashion. And again, your team, you need to make sure your team has expertise in planning, design, construction, project management, materials, what means how much time. I remember we were going to use curb stops, and we could just procure curb stops as part of our buffer, again, parking buffer. And that was not an acceptable outcome. And so we had to go and design a curb stop, and we are happy with the design outcome, but it's just, and it takes time. You need to have a team that can deliver that. And then also work with your local partners. Like in Houston, we have the Bicycle Advisory Committee, Bike Houston, Houston Bike Share, as I mentioned, the management districts and civic clubs and super neighborhoods that we worked with, and a lot of your nonprofit agencies can help you with the social media and public, getting the word out. It's important to have it's coming from someone else other than you. This is probably the most important one, I would say, is the project is going to evolve. You may have something in your mind that this is what a quick build looks like, but in quick build in Houston looks much different than quick build in some of the other cities. Our infrastructure was quite challenging. We took certain decisions on the first set of projects, and soon we realized that if we want to get our projects accepted, we are going to have to do a little bit more. So we ended up doing not just not just the bikeway component. We ended up doing the sidewalk component. We ended up doing intersection. So we didn't build all the sidewalks, but wherever a gap or a connection was left, that had to be addressed. Intersection safety improvements, transit access and transit access improvements. We worked with economic development teams to look at, if you're going to redo the bikeway, can we resurface the street, where they funded the resurfacing of the street, and now they are going to have a new beautiful street within that community that's going to be a new street for the next 10 years with an asphalt overlay. So you can create better outcomes with partnerships, and that's a critical part, and you have to allow the project to evolve for whatever is right for your community. And the last but not the least is the maintenance. In getting this projects done, I had not paid enough attention on the maintenance aspect, and now I am now that the first few projects have been 100% completed, and I'm trying to figure out what is the bikeway sweeper I'm going to buy, and how we are going to do the maintenance of these bikeways. It's surely a challenge, but we will get over it. But think through the maintenance part. It's not as simple as you think. Even procurement of, even if you have funding to procure a vehicle, it's going to take you a good 4 or 5 months to procure a vehicle, a street sweeper. And then looking forward, so as I described my boss, he was not. It means he was excited to see. He's excited. He rides the ongoing projects every day to his from his home to his office downtown, and he will talk to the construction ongoing contractors and our project managers on the street, and he'll call me and tell me how excited about he is. But then he'll say, what is the next big thing we are doing? So the next big thing we are doing is we connected 3 bayous with the first project. We are now adding 3 additional communities in Northeast, Southeast, and Southwest Houston as the next phase. These are not going to be by any way a quick build projects, but the intent is still the same, to use existing infrastructure as best as we can. But this would add another 18.4 miles of high comfort bikeway, connecting now 5 bayous with each other. And so that's and then partnerships also lead. We are looking at another partnership in the next month with, partners would reach out to you. And so another neighborhood reached out for another 7 to 10 miles of bikeway network that we would partner with them on. We recently funded, it's not just about funding the infrastructure. You also need to, in underserved communities, sometimes you have to provide access to bicycles also. And so we are partnered with our bike share system, Houston B-Cycle, and we just funded another we have funded over the last year or to over $1 million of B-Cycle stations and B-Cycle infrastructure in Precinct 1. That is my presentation. I'm going to hand it over back, and I am ready for any questions. Me and Ali are ready for any questions that you all may have.
Great. Thanks so much, Amar. I'm really excited to learn about what you're doing in Harris County and in Houston. And I'm glad you're ready for questions, because we have quite a few of them. So let me queue up our next slide here. What I've got on the screen are the contact information, email addresses for our panelists, both today's and tomorrow's. So write these down, make sure you've got them. If we don't get to your question and you have something you want to reach out individually, it's a good way to get in touch with us. You can reach out to us generally as well. So I'll just get into it. A lot of really good questions came in, and please continue to send them if you have them. One of the big questions that came in right away, and Aaliyah, I wonder if you could get us started on this one, is this this demand for bicycling and walking space that many cities have seen over the past several years, if not longer, has kind of coincided more recently with an increased demand for competition at the curb, and that curb space being so valuable for pickups and drop-offs, you know, rideshare companies are using that space. That's where our bicycle facilities are going, as well as being really critically important for pedestrian movement, especially crossing. So how have you seen sort of, I guess, in the trends around quick build, some of the quick deployment of these kind of measures, but also really the management around the curb zone? And are there any best practices you could point to, or kind of principles behind really managing that curb zone well to make sure our non-motorized users really get a fair shake when it comes down to decision making?
Yep, that is a fantastic question. I think that the most important thing that comes to mind to answer that is making sure that you are planning for curbside management at least a neighborhood or district scale at the same time that you're implementing the system of bikeways or intersection improvements, et cetera, because the questioner is exactly right that if you went out and implemented, especially if you're talking about separated bike lanes, implemented this network without consideration for pickups and drop-offs and transit stops and rideshare parking and all of those curbside demands, that you would certainly face some real backlash and challenges as after your system was implemented. So I think the most important thing that you can do is think about the idea of complete curbsides at a neighborhood or district scale, with the idea being that every curbside cannot serve every need, just like every street will not necessarily be a separated bike lane or the widest pedestrian sidewalk that your city has. You will have hopefully a connected and accessible sidewalk network on all streets, but your bikeways and your transit and your traffic, your vehicle traffic is all planned at a neighborhood or district scale with a hierarchy, and the curbs should be approached the exact same way. So I think it's really important that as long as you're approaching that at the same time that you are you're planning for these quick build projects, that you'll be able to handle it. And I know there's a lot of really good guidance out there about how to do that. The forthcoming AASHTO Bike Guide has excellent guidance in it about how to design things like curbside pickup and drop off, accessible parking spaces and transit bus islands and things like that alongside floating bus islands, as does the NACTO Bikeway Design Guide. So there's a lot of resources out there that you can use for the actual design of those curbside treatments.
No, thanks for that. Those are some good rules of thumb, I think, for thinking through those challenges. I wanted to, Amar, ask you if, in particular, you mentioned a number of challenges or maybe different trade-offs you had to encounter. I wonder if the curb management issue is one that you all grappled with. If you have any examples or stories from how to solve some of those problems.
Yes, I think so. That is always the biggest challenge when you're trying to create change. People are not opposed; they are just concerned about the change that happens. And in Houston, we dealt with a lot of, at least for this round of project, we had a lot of oversized infrastructure, and so in some areas we were lucky, but in areas where we did not have an ability to create, so where we had excessive infrastructure, we tried to maintain parking on both sides, or maintain that curb space on both sides, so that people are not, especially in residential community, are not impacted. Also in business communities, we had hotels that we had to work with in making sure that we walked through the design, and we had challenges. The thing is, a lot of this goes back to the goal. You have to work with your means if you're a city, you have to clearly define those goals, and if your goals are safety and your goals are improving accessibility for the most vulnerable user, your outcomes are going to be a little bit different. You may look at that additional parking from a different lens as compared to, again, the other goal I have seen is, do you really need that much capacity? Like, we had some streets with 5 lanes, and we were okay to dropping it to 2 lanes, and then and then preserving the parking so that businesses and like around hotels and around some major destinations, we had those drop off and pickup zones. So yes, we did work with those. Again, a lot of it requires partnership and working with the partners so that no one is unhappy about it when they see it happening.
Well, that's a good point. And one of the last things you mentioned was some of those points about capacity. And I think you sounds like you all have the leadership needed to kind of push you in the direction of, well, we really do want to rebalance our streets and kind of look at doing things in a different way than they have been. So in leadership, that might they have the support is there. I wonder to what degree there needed to be any changing of priorities or sort of education within maybe within the ranks of the folks who are doing the design and planning and engineering work. I mean, was there any holdup from the folks who have been in traffic engineering and transportation design for a long time that they needed to kind of be a culture shift within the agency in a way?
What at least in Houston, what we saw was, I mentioned that call I received from my boss. The next thing he did was call the mayor and said, "This is what I want to do." So I think so when at least when you have at the leadership level, you have that consensus. While there may be challenges, people get over those challenges. As we remember during the process, we had some concerns, and when we felt that we were at a standstill, I had to ask my boss for help, and we had a meeting with the Texas Department of Transportation and the mayor's office and our public works departments and our engineering department, and we pretty much before the meeting we found consensus on how we are going to come up with an outcome that meets the city's intent and still meets the all ages and abilities guidelines. So I think so that's why, at least for the Houston story, leadership has been critical for us. I'm sure other speakers can from Minneapolis and San Jose can outline their examples and relates to that.
I wanted to see, thanks for that, Amar. I wanted to see actually, Aaliyah, did you have a thought on that one as well?
Well, I have started to think of these projects as equal parts design projects and equal parts change management efforts, because in most instances you are implementing a facility type and or using materials that are new to your jurisdiction. And so the truth is everybody's on a learning curve. And acknowledging that and recognizing that openly at the beginning of the project, I think is extremely important, so that people who are in, senior leadership positions, who have been doing this very professionally and very well for their jurisdictions for decades, don't feel like they have to come to the table with all the answers. Everybody is learning and exploring as they go through these processes. And when we approach them with different client jurisdictions, there's almost always a training component where in the beginning we are doing some design trainings related to, if it's about separated bike lanes or about Vision Zero safety infrastructure designs that are not conventional designs. We usually do some design training for all the staff who will be involved in the beginning, and then do a lot of iterations of a design toolkit or design guide that sort of guides the implementation along the way. So I think that's really important for everybody to know going in, and to talk about openly with the leadership who's involved, that so nobody feels like they have to come to the table with all the answers at the beginning.
No, that's a really good point. I think, and it gets back to something I mentioned at the outset, that new training on bike facility design from FHWA. I mean, we are seeing, I think, a deployment of new types of facilities at a regular pace. We're seeing new types of innovative treatments and designs, and I think there's more and more need, if ever, for departments to just be getting up on what those designs are and how to use them, because there's more in the toolbox than we've ever had. So I think that it speaks to that ongoing education and training need. Amar, I wanted to ask you this question. We're really focusing on urban environments with this series quite a lot, but in Harris County, I imagine you have some areas that really, for all intents and purposes, you could consider maybe more rural in nature, different from maybe more your dense urban environment. And we had some questions about typical applications, what these quick build applications might look like in a more rural setting, or if there are types of treatments that you're using outside of your downtown core that are different, just because the context is different, the nature of the area is different. I wonder if you could speak to that rural application.
So we have rural and really rural areas in unincorporated Harris County, and so in the rural areas, in the more suburban rural areas, we are doing two kinds of projects. One is so we have started doing design projects, and they're ready to be let in the near future in unincorporated Harris County also. So there was one instance in front of the school where people were driving on a 20 miles an hour speed zone. We found speeds close to 50 miles an hour on those roadways. So we said we have an issue of overcapacity. So we are going to take a lane and build a protected bike lane for kids to be able to get to school. In another instance, and parts of the project where we did not have the capacity, we are doing shared use path or kind of treatment to be able to connect neighborhoods to schools. So because I think so school is a unit that it's very easy to start from for a suburban community. People are still walking their kids to school in these areas, and even in urban areas, I would say. But so it's easier for them to see those improvements. Part of it is like changing a culture. How do you change a culture? So in another suburban neighborhoods, like we partnered with them to do, they wanted to do sidewalk projects. I said, I'll do sidewalk projects, but I'll do sidewalks not, I don't want to do 5 feet sidewalks. I want to do 8 feet sidewalks. And they said, why would you want to do 8 feet sidewalks? I said, these are connecting to schools and destination. And if people are driving on your streets at 40 miles an hour, if a kid wants to go to school, I want at least a wide sidewalk. And again, I didn't have room to put a standard side path, 10 feet wide side path. So that's why we're looking at a different dimension. We are doing another one where we are connecting that same neighborhood to a park. And we were able to find a way of using a neighborhood drainage channel or excess right of way to do like a trail system to connect them to park. So in many of the rural and suburban networks, we are looking at drainage channel and trails as a first phase, where we are reconstructing streets with the major reconstruction projects. I'm doing the 8 feet wide side path on both sides, so that if kids are connecting to parks and schools, that's another way of doing it. Again, I'm not saying those are inexpensive projects, but my hope is if you can find a new project. One of the projects that we did not do was an advisory bike. The infrastructure, as you said, was rural, and at that point, the city, some people at the city were open to looking at advisory bike lanes, and so we said, all right, we can put a 10 miles of advisory bike lane network in this neighborhood, and if we can come up with some pedestrian bicycle safety measures of putting some speed bumps and other things, we may be able to make sure that the speeds are appropriate in this area. And that was one where I wanted to say you need to have your goals and your toolkit done up front, because that is one where the city did not feel comfortable at that point and was not wanting to move forward. And then we said, if we cannot do a network, we need to find another project. And that's when we went from 33 miles to 23 miles. We said, if we cannot achieve a network, it doesn't make sense for Precinct 1 to be involved in that project. So, and I think so, having your partner, having your design team really guide you through that, to the implications of doing something substandard is important. So I think so that's where really having a good team benefits you. This was all I had done was bike plan until then, and then this was all new. I had never done a capital project, so this was a great learning curve for me.
Oops, I was on mute. Thank you for that, Amar. I think some of those rural applications are interesting, especially from some folks who are maybe working with state DOTs and others who have to really think about a broad type of sections and settings where they're deploying these projects. So that's very useful. I had another question for you, Amar. You spoke at length about the leadership and support you have from leadership in your precinct, and you really do have a champion there. Many of the attendees I don't think are maybe as lucky or in the same position. And so what they might be after are examples of things that could really help bring people in leadership positions around to these issues and really garner that support from those who are in positions to make those types of decisions, but maybe don't understand transportation issues, or they don't come to that as their first real big priority. So I wonder if you can think of arguments or types of messages that might really resonate with someone in a leadership position. And it may be things that really excite your commissioner about these issues. And what are those types of stories that people could be telling to really bring that leadership role around?
I think so. So the commissioner, as I mentioned earlier, he used to take tours of people in the state legislature and people who used to go to conferences to his peers and share with him the experiences and for the passion he had. He still does that. Now that he's now he's a county commissioner, he goes to the county planning and conferences, and he rides his bike everywhere. He'll figure out how to get a hold of bike, whichever city, whichever country he goes to. And so he will find partners there, and he will do those tours. And I think so that for leaders to hear from their peers is really important. So I think so the one thing what we could think about is where we have these leaders, how do we encourage our leaders to be doing more in terms of talking to their peers? And the commissioner still mentions his when he went to New York and met then Mayor Bloomberg, and how impressed he was with what Mayor Bloomberg had achieved, helped him really push forward and push us get this done in such a short time frame. So I think so when leaders hear that from fellow leaders, I think so that's an important thing. We can always I think so leaders sometimes hear a lot from advocacies, but hearing from fellow leaders is important for them. That would be one thing I would say. I'm sure other panelists could add something. For us, if equity was a big thing, and there is no way we can, as I said, as I mentioned some of the demographics, we have a lot of underserved communities that the only way we can improve their access is working with our transit agency and improving access to transit and your last mile on a bike. With all our metro buses have bike racks, and they are working and looking at bike racks at bus stops now. And so there are different ways that you can work, leaders can work in terms of telling the story that is a more local story. Like for our BAYOU GREENWAY stuff, the one story when we were doing the bike plan that we felt that echoed very much with people and even local leaders that are not bicyclists are saying, you're building 150 miles of these bikeways, but people cannot get from their neighborhoods. It doesn't make sense for people half mile away to drive. So making that last mile connection and making those improvements can help gain momentum within those communities.
Great. Yeah, I like that a lot. I mean, and one of the things you mentioned right away is kind of looking to peer cities, and leaders really do share those notes. And I wanted to ask, Aaliyah, you gave a sort of, to start out, a really kind of high level view of this whole trend we're seeing around the country. A lot of cities are really exploring these options. And I don't know, this is maybe just me speculating. I wonder to what degree you think there might be some element of sort of friendly competition between cities in this area. I think cities see others doing things and they kind of want to be part of that. Do you kind of see that happening?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Amar mentioned this in one of his early comments that it was actually compelling to Houston and Harris County to do something that would be nationally notable. And I think that lots of cities and counties are compelled by that. And especially as these topics get more and more attention through webinars like this one and at conferences and through social media, everybody wants in the mix, especially when, although of course there is blowback, there's pushback and there's challenges in all of these projects, but by and large, the results tend to be ultimately on balance positive in the long term. And so I think that any elected leader looks at that, and when they learn about that from their peer cities, they want a piece.
Great. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think I think we're seeing kind of all these cities we're featuring in this series, you know, maybe coming at that a little bit as well. I've heard before that no city really wants to be the first one to do something, but I think after a few of those dominoes fall, there's lots of interest and things can really begin to expand. I think we're seeing that with quick build networks, it sounds like. I'm going to pause this here, really just pausing to continue tomorrow into our second part of our series, when we're going to bring in the perspectives from the city of San Jose and the city of Minneapolis. We're going to bring back Aaliyah and Amar tomorrow. We thank them very much for being here today and sharing their perspectives. They'll be able to jump into the panel discussion along with Matthew, John, and Peter. So we'll get going tomorrow at the same time. I hope that you can join us. Be on the lookout later today for a follow-up email from me. That'll have a link to the archive of today's webinar, all the material associated with this, as well as the registration information for tomorrow's session. If you're not registered already, you want to make sure that you're able to sign up for that. So thanks again to our excellent panel, and we'll see you all again back here tomorrow. Thanks very much.